Chapter 27. Katayha and Izmir. At the latter end of 1937 I was ordered to Katayha on duty, and I travelled there one bitterly cold morning in search of a house to which my family could be transferred, for they had made it quite clear that they had no intention of remaining alone in Eskişehir here. At the station of Katayha, I hired a Tartar phaeton to take me into town. The bleakness and loneliness of the place was depressing, and I remembered the much maligned Eskişehir with positive affection. The scenery was flat and uninteresting. The few houses we passed were so old and so dreary looking, with the eternal cafes on the windows. When we got near to what looked partially like civilization, I called to the driver to stop. I'd no desire to go any further. I turned in at the door of a cafe to get warmed, but the music blaring from a loudspeaker, the thick blue fog of smoke, the terrible noise from innumerable trick-tack sets caused me to hastily back out again, deciding it would undoubtedly be better to die in the cold. I saw a chemist shop and I entered, ostensibly to purchase aspirin, but I soon fell into conversation with the owner of the shop. He was bored with the rough life around him and eager to exchange pleasantries with a newcomer. I said that I was looking for a house, and he said he did not think I would be successful in this respect. He introduced me to a fat, short man who said that he knew everything there was to be known in Katayha and everyone, and he readily offered to accompany me in my search for somewhere to live. He asked if he thought it possible for me to find a brick or cement house, and he threw back his leonine head and roared with laughter. There are only 2 brick houses in the whole of Katayha, he said, and both of them are occupied, one by an artillery major and the other by a Russian captain. What the hell is a Russian captain doing here? I asked, but he did not know, and I thought it extremely odd indeed, although why it was odd I did not know, perhaps because he was a Russian. That day we discovered 5 empty houses, but none of them was suitable. In particular, 2 of them were in the older, lower part of the town, in streets so narrow that it was possible to shake hands from your windows with the occupants of the opposite windows. The ancient houses were so tall that one could not but wonder if the sun ever shone in these dreary streets, or if it was only a remote brightness out of sight in the far sky. All the windows were tightly latticed with the cafes, so perhaps in the long run it did not matter whether the sun reached these streets or not, for the rooms of these houses could never have felt its warm touch or the cooler chill of the wind. We entered one of the houses and the ceilings looked as if colonies of bedbugs lived there, in the dark, broken wooden beams, and no light filtered through the closed cafes. I was suddenly depressed and longed to get out of the cold, harsh air again into the light. I could not imagine my mother living in a house such as this. In the end, the only place I was able to get, which seemed to be in any way suitable, was the house that had once been the chapel of the Malevi dervishes before Ataturk had abolished them. It had apparently lain empty for some time, for people had a reluctance to make it into a home. It was a big, roomy place though, with many windows, and was arranged very compactly on 2 floors. Unfortunately, the tomb of a Malevi leader lay in the garden. I could not think I should feel entirely comfortable with him in such proximity. Since the front and the back of the house appeared to be alike, nobody ever knew for certain which was which, so we all took to using the door which came handiest to our approach. From one side of the house we faced other houses, but on the opposite side we looked right across to an old Mevlevi cemetery, which was at the bottom of a high, bare mountain. At the apex lay another grave, and to look out to such continual greyness and unrelieved bleakness seemed to be like looking at the edge of the world. Surprisingly, my mother liked the strange house, loving the largeness of the rooms and the tall, bright windows, but my grandmother complained that badness lay over it, could not be persuaded to like the house the short time she lived there. We had bought a dog whilst we were in Eskişehir, a small ball of white fluff, whom we had called Fidele, with I wonder what unconscious memories stirring of the dogs who had roamed the gardens of Sarayir so long ago. This dog was now full grown, and my mother's dog more than anyone else's, and when he entered the house with us that day in Katayha, he ran sniffing everywhere, then came back to lie at my feet, whining a little. He could not be coaxed to mount the stairs voluntarily, and I had to carry him up, he all the time shivering as though something terrible was about to leap out at him from the shadows. From the very beginning, my grandmother was difficult about the place. She chose a bedroom overlooking the other houses and steadfastly refused to remain alone, even during the daytime, and almost succeeded in frightening us all. She kept looking over her shoulders at odd moments and would sometimes pause in the middle of a conversation to ask what was that peculiar noise and from whence it came. I'm reasonably certain that she never saw or heard anything she would not have seen or heard in any other house, but because she knew that the Mevlevi dervishes had once been there, she never failed to associate evil things with their name. We could not fathom why. My mother's health sadly deteriorated here. She grew more and more morbid and absent-minded and complained all the time of headaches. Eventually I managed to obtain a transfer to Izmir on the strength of the doctor ordering a change of air for her. Mehmed, who was at the time stationed also in Izmir, arranged to find a house for us, and I sent my family on ahead of me, whilst I remained for a few days longer in Katayha to clear things up. Mehmed and I had not met for over 2 years, and when we saw each other in Izmir, we embraced each other warmly and commented on the apparent ruddy health of the other. He told me that my mother and grandmother had already settled down very well in the house he had discovered in Karshaka. A pretty house, he said it was, on the other side of the harbour. He and I sat in a casino overlooking the harbour, and we discussed my mother. "She's very neurotic, of course," said Mehmed with detachment, as if she were just a patient and not his mother. I envied him his indifference, and then I remembered that he had not lived at home for a very long time. I thought too how little we all knew about each other, how, springing from the same root, we had nevertheless divided until now. We knew less than nothing about each other's dreams. Mehmed's decisive eyes looked as if he were not interested in dreaming. He was only interested in the physical ailments of humanity, the best way to cure them, anxious to make well the pain, not studying too deeply the psychological pattern the mind made. He asked me what it was I was thinking about so seriously. I said it was nothing, unwilling to share with him the intimacy of thought. I suggested that we should go home. The new house stood squarely in a garden full of palm trees and roses. A large sloping lawn at the back gave on to a patch where lemon trees grew stockily and tangerines. And what was it about that house that reminded me of another house that had stood squarely in its gardens, that had been burned so long ago? There was a terrace which overlooked the harbour, and I hoped that this peaceful spot would give my mother back her health. There was a balcony too at the front of the house, and my grandmother never tired of sitting here to watch the passers-by, but my mother sat at the back and watched the boats that sailed the far places. And she would talk of Istanbul and the Bosphor, and I knew that her heart would remain in her beloved city forever. Far into the nights they would sit together talking, with the moon riding high in the clear skies, throwing its reflection to the water, lavishly gilding a pat in the sea, softening the outlines of the houses that by day could look so harsh. My mother appeared to be contented. She had her sons with her once again. She complained less and less of headaches, but she talked about Istanbul with nostalgia, as if she would never return to it again. I wish I had the words to paint the strange enchantment of Izmir. The little crooked streets, with their air of secrecy and squalor, the haphazard shops in the side streets, the open carriages and the noisy trams and the hooting of the boats that overrode all other sounds, the casinos fronting the harbour with the never-ending strains of music issuing from them, the hot sunlight and the blue sky and the golden sands, the tree-lined roads and the wisteria and the bougainvillea that hangs everywhere like a scented purple curtain. Many times Mehmed and I rode in the open carriages, drowsing under the evening warmth, the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves beating their rhythmic tattoo. The tall green mountains rose steeply behind the city. The half-tropical vegetation grew rankly and luxuriantly amongst the old sun-warmed stones. On hot nights, we would sometimes visit the swimming pool, which was filled with seawater, and we would walk back home together in the moonlight, the houses we passed standing asleep in their tranquil gardens. The smell of tangerine and orange trees would hang heavy on the air, the lime trees giving off their own sporadic essence. Most of the houses had vines growing in fig trees and exotic palms, and near the harbour were tree-lined new boulevards, and always, no matter what the hour, the twanging of a guitar or the strains of a Turkish tango from the casinos to break the stillness sweetly. There was a fishing village just beyond Karşıyaka, and occasionally I dined there alone in a little cafe where the fish were cooked upon request. The owner of the cafe showed me the sea pool where swam the fish and invited me to take my choice, and I would spend many a pleasant hour there, choosing and eating and drinking raka until my belt had to be ignominiously loosened. Farther on lies Güzel Yala, where the houses march up the green hills facing the sea. There is a cool hillside cafe here with terraces and tropical vegetation in the gardens and good food to make the journey worth the while. And everywhere in Izmir, in crazy profusion, are the flower beds with their hot splashes of colour to hurt the eyes and beat upon the senses. And Izmir still looks foreign, a cosmopolitan city with only the mosques and the slender minarets to remind one that one is still in Turkey.